Today I will be discussing an article published in March of 2020 in IBD. The article is entitled Immunogenicity of High-Dose Influenza Vaccine for Patients with Inflammatory Bowel Disease on Anti-TNF Monotherapy, a randomized clinical trial. The article was published by Caldera and colleagues from the University of Wisconsin. The question they wanted to ask was, would the administration of the high-dose influenza vaccine, which contains 4 times the amount of antigens, induce a higher antibody response in patients with IBD treated with anti-TNF therapy compared to the standard dose influenza vaccine? So why do we care? We all tell our IBD patients to get the flu shot, but does it really matter? Absolutely. 1, influenza is bad. 2, IBD patients are more likely to get influenza and more likely to be hospitalized with that influenza compared to the general population. And 3, there have been multiple studies that have showed that IBD patients treated with anti-TNF therapy have a much lower response to the influenza vaccine. So in comes Caldera and colleagues. They conducted a small, randomized double-blind control trial of the high-dose influenza vaccine compared to the standard dose influenza vaccine in 40 patients with IBD on anti-TNF monotherapy. They also looked at 19 patients with IBD on vedolizumab who received the standard dose vaccine and compared this to 20 healthy controls, as well as to those IBD patients treated with anti-TNF therapy. So the outcomes they were interested in were, does antibody concentrations change at baseline, 2 to 4 weeks post-immunization, and 6 weeks post-immunization? They also looked at seroconversion and seroprotection. So what did they find? They found that antibody concentrations at 3 weeks were higher in influenza strain H3N2 among patients who received the high-dose influenza vaccine compared to those who received the standard vaccine. However, these antibody concentrations seemed to decrease at 6 months and were actually similar between the two groups, questioning the long-term immunity. There was no response seen to the other influenza strains, including H1N1 and influenza B Victoria. In the IBD patients treated with vedolizumab, they actually found similar antibody concentrations to the healthy controls at all 3 time points. But these were much higher than IBD patients on anti-TNF therapies treated with the standard dose, and similar to IBD patients on anti-TNF therapy treated with the high-dose influenza vaccine. There were several limitations and things you should be aware of in regards to the study. 1, the small sample size meant we were unable to detect differences in safety and small differences in efficacy. 2, the study used surrogate outcomes for vaccine efficacy and effectiveness. What we care about is prevention of illness. However, serum antibodies against hemagglutinin do appear to correlate well with vaccine-induced protection, but it's not perfect. 3, the study only demonstrated increased antibody concentrations to the H1N3 strain, not the other strains. Given the nature of the influenza vaccine, it is unclear if this is generalizable to other influenza strains and mutations that we might find in other seasons. 4, the titers did decrease at 6 months, questioning the development of prolonged immunity. 5, the study didn't evaluate patients on combination therapy, JAK inhibitors, or anti-IL-12/23, so it's unclear if these findings apply to these patients as well. In my opinion, most importantly, the high-dose vaccine is more expensive, and we don't know if the benefits of improved immunity outweigh the increased costs. In conclusion, IBD patients on anti-TNF therapy may improve protection against influenza with high-dose influenza vaccine. In addition, IBD patients on vedolizumab actually had similar concentrations of antibodies and seroprotection when compared to healthy control. So, should I treat all my IBD patients on anti-TNF therapy with the high-dose influenza vaccine? Not yet. There's definitely an important signal, and this is definitely an important study. However, larger validation studies are needed. Most importantly, we need studies that evaluate the effects on outcomes we care about, including hospitalization, pneumonia, costs, and death, to determine if this is a high-value intervention worth implementing to standard of care.